Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Unless you're coming in from England, good afternoon. Um, Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box there as well. Yeah. So, this was a session that Lama Justin was originally going to offer, um, but he is still recovering from COVID-19. So I stepped in to take care to offer this, and so hopefully it will be helpful for us. Um, I wanted to start by reading a poem, um, and this poem is called "What They Did Yesterday Afternoon." This is by Worcestershire. If you know of Worcestershire, I think she's Nigerian, British poet, and living in London. I think she's in London. And beautiful poet. She was the Young Poet Laureate for London. Um, and you can easily find her work on YouTube. And she has books as well, too, a couple of books of poetry out. Um, and for those of you who are super, super duper um, Beyonce fans, you already know who she is because Beyonce used a lot of her work in Lemonade, so the beautiful like spoken word lyrics in between the vignettes in Lemonade. That's Worcestershire's work. And that's how I actually found out about her was through Lemonade, and then just reading more of her stuff. So it was really quite beautiful. Um, so this poem is called "What They Did Yesterday Afternoon," and it really speaks to the work that we want to kind of get into this morning. So again, "What They Did Yesterday Afternoon" by Worcestershire. They set my aunt's house on fire. I cried the way women on TV do, folding at the middle like a 5-pound note. I called the boy who used to love me. I tried to okay my voice. I said, "Hello." He said, "Orson, what's wrong? What's happened?" I've been praying, and these are what my prayers look like. Dear God, I come from 2 countries. One is thirsty, the other is on fire. Both need water. Later that night, I held an atlas in my lap, ran my fingers across the whole world, and whispered, "Where does it hurt?" It answered, "Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere." And so, you know, it really, I think for me at least in my practice, is really kind of like articulates a lot of what I'm experiencing around just the grief of what this period has been, but it articulates the grief that I've experienced my whole life, and grief being, this experience of loss, and how we've attempted to relate to that loss. Um, for some of you in the room, um, maybe some folks from my DC days. I used to, when I ran a center in DC, I used to do a lot of pop culture on teaching. And so I remember one year, I was like really into Lady Gaga and The Edge of Glory, that song, The Edge of Glory. And The Edge of Glory was actually a song that she wrote as her grandfather was dying. Like the day her grandfather was dying, or the evening her grandfather was dying, she just kind of sat down at the piano and just started like playing, working with these lyrics. And I used to give these like talks about particularly that song, The Edge of Glory. And, for me, you know, like there is this sense, that song is about death. It's like actually about going to the edge of death and dealing with it. But for me, that song was like actually going to the edge of like this deep kind of grieving, for me, this deep kind of like trying to figure out like, what do I do with this space that's opened up that used to be so occupied with something that I loved, something or someone that I loved and cherished and appreciated. And now, like, what was holding that space has gone. And now I'm trying to figure out who I am in relationship to this wide open space, that's open. And that's for me, and physically or like mentally as an image, how like grieving feels for me. It's like I'm trying to figure out who I am in relationship to the space that has just opened up gradually or suddenly, you know. And that struggle to relate to that space, it feels like woundedness everywhere. There's a physical woundedness, there's a mental woundedness everywhere, in my experience. Um, and and I learned, through years of my practice, working working in hospital chaplaincy, particularly, is that this kind of grief is just, it is what happens. And of course, I learned that in my practice, in my Dharma practice, but that you begin to see that living out differently when you're just in the world, and you're trying to be with people, you're trying to be with yourself as you're experiencing these things around loss and letting go. And that there's that deep, wide openness, and for me, I've talked about this a little bit before, but um, when I really got serious about this work around love, and this happened to me in retreat where, for years before retreat, it was, just trying to love myself. I was like, oh, I have to love myself, I have to do this meta loving kindness, I have to love myself. May I be well, may I experience joy, may I do whatever, blah, 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 and I just kind of tricked myself into believing, oh, well, that's working, because it was so easy for me to do. But when I got into retreat, the work actually deepened, and I realized, that there was this deep, I call it hole, but it felt like a deep, bottomless black pit in my experience. And for years, I'd been trying to fill that pit up with love, with compassion, with kindness, with generosity, and that pit, that hole would just swallow. It was like negative space. It would just swallow this energy up, you know. Um, and I remember getting super frustrated in retreat, just realizing I was like, how do you actually? It's impossible actually to love yourself. If loving myself means that I have to fill this hole, this thing up, like, and it's not working, what do I do? And then it really dawned on me, you know, that the practice wasn't trying to fill this hole up. The work was actually trying to love the hole, you know. The work was actually trying to allow that hole, that experience to be there, to give it agency, to give both this whole agency and myself the agency. So the agency for the whole to be there, to take its space, and the agency for me to allow it to be there, and the agency that gave me choice to continue to offer this whole, this place in my experience. And that was this moment of transformation, because that whole was not just my representation of myself, but it was also, the deep embodiment. Well, not the deep embodiment, not embodiment, but like the manifestation of, my brokenheartedness, and my brokenheartedness encompassed the woundedness, the trauma, the pain, the aching, the suffering. It held all of that. That was the composite experience, this black hole, the composite experience of all of my, suffering expressed through essentially the experience of brokenheartedness, right? And so again, learning how to let that brokenheartedness be there, not to like continue to feed into it, but just stepping back and saying, okay, there you are, right? Like here you are. And that was for me the beginning of liberation from a lot of suffering. And I said, God, no, I'm actually not supposed to try to push it away or try to erase it or try to dissolve it. I'm actually just supposed to let it be there, and to give it the space and to love it in a way that I'd never loved anything. I never experienced that kind of love where love expressed itself as like this deep acceptance, non-judgmental, just kind of space holding. And I don't know if, I don't think I'd ever been taught that. I don't think that anyone had told me that. Maybe they did, and maybe I just didn't get it. But like in that moment, I realized that for myself. And so I think about right now, and for many of us, we are not new to grief. That is, I think, a very basic human experience of trying to relate to loss, trying to figure out what to do with it, how to work with it, how to shape it. I think that's just as old as like being conscious, that kind of work of grief. But I think it may be very much compounded for many of us right now, because we are experiencing a complete loss of our old lives and the loss of our old cultures, our old ways of being. And that's not, an overstatement or exaggeration. It's a complete, the rug has been completely pulled from under us, right? And we are having to touch the ground, the bare floor in a way that we've never had to before. And that is so overwhelmingly heartbreaking to experience that, especially if you feel as if you've had no agency. The agency has been taken away. You've had no choice but to engage in this period, this period of what I have been calling for almost, about a year and a half, 2 years, the apocalypse. This is our apocalypse, and it doesn't necessarily have an end date. So it's definitely didn't have a beginning date, and it certainly won't have an end date. And so we're having to step into this moment of complete changing and disruption. And it's about moving into relationship with impermanence. As we understand from Octavia Butler, God is change. The mother is change, right? God, the mother, is change, and we're changing together. We're all changing, and that is suffering. It can be suffering if we're so attached to permanence, things staying the same, having predictable outcomes, things remaining the same way I left it. If you're really attached to that, and most of us are in certain ways, then that intensifies our deep suffering, right? The Buddha talked a lot about letting go. And I think sometimes in Buddha Dharma in particular, that can be the the way that some of us translate that or teach that can come off as being really cold, and detached, where the response is, oh, let it go. Just like that song from Frozen, let it go, let it go. If only letting go could sound as beautiful, as that song. But unfortunately, it rarely is. um, Letting go sometimes for me just sounds like a loud, like industrial punk thing where it's just like louder, and it's like, no, I don't want to let go. It's really dramatic, right? Um, but I know that like what we have to do to like, yes, letting go is the teaching, but we have to do that letting go in a way that's kind, in a way that feels generous, in a way that we have to like actually call in the resources that we need, the support that we need to support us in that letting go. And that letting go isn't about, okay, dumping it and pushing it away. But the letting go is really this. Let me just illustrate this. Like I have like my mala here, you know. And so most of us go through life just like really holding on tight to everything, you know. Like you try to pull it, it's like we're not letting go of this shit. We're holding intensely, aggressively to everything. We hold to our identities, we hold on to our stuff, we hold on to our opinions and our beliefs, and our belief that we're always right, and this and that, we're just holding on to it. And the letting go teaching is actually about how do we actually enter into a relationship to things where we allow space. How do we relax the death grip and then just relax that grip, and we haven't let go. We're still in a relationship to the thing itself, right? But I've just relaxed, So I can walk around, like I can move my hand. I can go, raise my hand up and down like this. I can just move around like this. And yeah, the thing still stays there, but I'm also really relaxed. And in that relaxing, I'm also negotiating in my practice what it will mean when the day comes where this mullet just slips out of my hand and I don't grab for it, because that's what I'm practicing for, right? In this space, I'm trying to give everything space for this thing to do whatever it needs to do, right? So when I talk about identity, it's like I can be really, really, really like gripping on to, like, for instance, like my identity as Black, being Black, right? I can really, really hold on to that, right? But I know what I've experienced in my practice, is that I've had to even relax around my deep identification with being Black, you know, and to like allow there to be space around that identity, you know. And that has been a deep source of liberation for me, because it has helped me to enter into the reality of not just Blackness, but any identity location. That reality is that it is always shifting, it is always changing, And in my practice, I'm trying to show up to the ways things are naturally shifting and changing within me and around me, But then there's this energy, there's the grieving that arises, right? And the grieving is this energy that invites us into being in a relationship with change. It's the pain that comes from moving from one location to another, and that grieving will be more intense the more we try to hold on and stay put in one location, because that grieving is just a door opening, helping us to move into a new space, a new spot. As the Jeffersons say, moving on up. We're trying to move on up. you know, as we used to sing in church growing up. We're trying to move a little higher, right? We're moving on up a little higher, right? However you want to think about that, conceptualize it. We're trying to move from one location to the other, going up the rough side of the mountain. That's right, and it's always fucking rough. So it's never going to be a smooth side of the mountain because it's not worth it, right? A smooth side of the mountain doesn't actually produce, experiences of realization and liberation. It's the roughness, it's the obstacles, it's the suffering that actually produce wisdom. Because we're having to like put our dharma, our practice into action, moving from obstacle to obstacle. you know so that's what we're trying to like really engage in. We're trying to like learn how to move, but we're also trying to open up the space around like this difficult energy of grief that comes up for us, right? And so right now we're individually going through that, and then also collectively we're going through that as well. So that can seem like really overwhelming. um, and and where we're headed to, um, the place that we're eventually going to land, is a place that we can only get to if we just commit to the work of grieving, and which I call mourning, specifically skillful mourning, and I talk about all of this too in my next book, Love and Rage. I have a lot of work around grieving, more mourning, skillful mourning, trauma, and heartbreak. That's like a good bulk of the book, because that's really how I have worked with my anger, is by actually looking at um, everything beneath the anger, right? Which is the woundedness, the brokenheartedness beneath the anger. Um, and someone can feel free to list the book right there, um, in the chats as well. So wanted to do a little bit of practice today, but before we get into that, I wonder if we can just spend a few minutes, if people would like to, in the chat box, is kind of like list some of their, I don't know, how what their experience of grief is right now, and where that grief is coming from, and what do we think we're grieving. If you can put some of that in the chat box, that would be wonderful. Uh, and if someone would like to jump on screen and have a dialogue just about what they're experiencing too, that could be really wonderful. We can do that in the next 10 minutes, if people are up for that. And there's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, which from has been expanded in many different ways. Recently, sometimes there's 6, sometimes there's 7 stages of grief. But just in case some of us aren't familiar with that, the first stage of grief is denial, which when I think about the epidemic, the pandemic right now, it's like absolutely there's a lot of like a lot of folks who are like, well, this isn't happening. This is just a hoax by the Democrats to do something really sophisticated that the Democrats don't have ability to do. And even if you're not into that kind of like conspiracy theory, for other people, literally, other people are like, oh, I don't know anyone who's sick. I don't live in a place where there's a lot of illness, and so like why, I don't really think this is a big deal. So that's definitely happening. They can happen collectively, they can happen individually, and these stages are things that we go through. Some of them we may go through one of them, or we go through them at different orders. So this isn't a fixed thing, but this is just kind of the common order. And so the second stage is anger, like we're just pissed, that, and what's beneath that anger is the hurt, like we're hurt, this loss, this thing that we've lost, this situation that we're in, we're pissed off, but we've actually just been deeply wounded and hurt. And so the anger arises out of that, right? And so, when I work with anger, is that like, yeah, anger comes out of the tension between being hurt and wanting to take care of ourselves, and then that tension between those two things is the anger, and it's easy to ride, to get swept up in that anger and just to do like really stupid things to hurt ourselves and to hurt others. But in order to gain agency over anger, we actually have to step back to take care of ourselves. And then we have like an anchor and a foundation in self-care, which helps us to turn our attention back to the energy of anger. And then we can use it to really get shit done. Like we can really use, instead of using it to hurt other people, to protect ourselves, we can think wisely and critically and say, okay, I'm going to use this intense energy to do all kinds of stuff that's really helpful for myself and the collective. So moving on to the third, bargaining, what can I do to make this go away? How can I go back in time, as Cher saying, if I could go, what's the lyric? Go back, if I could turn back time, if I could turn back time. And that's for me a trap. It's a huge trap that I used to fall into perpetually. If only I could build that time machine and go back and say this thing differently, or do this, or like, these all these really intense things, that we want to do. If I could just do this and that, and it's not helpful. Like you have to keep looking forward, right? And I think that's part of a lot of our suffering, and will be more of our suffering as a collective as we move deeper and deeper into this period. It's like what we're doing is like we've left shore. We've all gotten on the boat and we've left shore, and we think that at any point we could jump off this boat and swim back to the land that we came from. And that's not the case. Like we're out in sea now, and the only way forward, only way to go is to go forward, is to do the work, of skillful mourning, to start metabolizing that energy and moving forward, to get to this new land that we're trying to get to. And then when I work with my ancestors, and we're, I've done really intense ancestor work, and I continue to do it. But like when I work with my ancestors, I've done a lot of work around the Middle Passage, transhistorical trauma, the Middle Passage, and actually going back into those spaces and those energies. It's like a middle passage that we're moving through, and that's what my ancestors have been showing me. Like this is a period of a middle passage. And we're moving through this journey, and it's hard, it's brutal, and we didn't choose it, but our destiny is to land, to be somewhere else, and we have to start figuring out how to survive and how to make a home and where we're going. We can't do that through bargaining. We just have to, we move forward. It's like whatever is happening is happening. And that's for me a constant teaching. Whatever is happening is happening, and whatever will come, and to sit with that sadness, that broken, that longing, to hold space for it, to do all the practices that we've been doing, all the practices that I've been offering on social media, all the practices we've been doing in Bhumi Sparsha, all the practices that will come forward. And by the way, I'm working on a new set of Tonglen teachings as well. So those are going to get out hopefully very soon in the next few days. I know it's a lot I have to do in the next few days. But Tonglen is one of those techniques, those skills that we use to just kind of like work through the grief and the mourning. So the fourth in this stage, these 5 stages, is depression. And depression doesn't necessarily mean clinical severe depression, but it does incorporate clinical severe depression. But we're also talking about these periods of just really intense deflated energy, deflated motivation. And I think that is something that is very widespread. I think that's a huge shared experience. As people I talk to, everyone's tired, like they're losing focus. It's hard to stay motivated. That is an expression of certain kinds of depressive energy, not necessarily depression, but there are many cases of clinical depression that many of us have been struggling with before, and it becomes a little more severe. So one of the things that will become the next epidemic, if it's not already happening, is the epidemic of mental illness and people's mental, that's the work around mental health support. All that begins to kind of weaken because you're in deep isolation, and no wonder people out in the streets kind of protesting. Now, there is a lot of other reasons, people are out in the streets protesting, but I think a piece of why people are out protesting is because the isolation too is too much, or not even, it's not even protesting, but it's just breaking social distancing and physical distancing guidelines, and just like wanting to reopen things and going to the beach and doing all this stuff. It's just like, I can't be in isolation. And part of me gets that. I don't know how I would be doing now if it wasn't for the fact that I spent 3.5 years in like isolation. And that was a choice. Like I chose to do that. And I paid money to do that, to go into isolation. Imagine fucking that. But if it wasn't for that experience, like I wouldn't have the skills and the appreciation, to work with isolation. But this depressive energy is energy that we have to move through, we have to channel, we have to metabolize, and we're going to do just a short practice to work on that, right? In this session. You have to move energy around. All the practices that I've been introducing, particularly the deity practices, Medicine Buddha, and Matara, these are practices where we're moving energy, we're moving great amounts of energy through breath, through visualization. And it's really tough to do, and it's tough partially because we often do not have regular practices to turn to regularly keep energy moving in our experience. If we have like a yoga movement practice or a regular pranayama practice, you're moving energy around, and that's really important to keep this energy moving, to keep connected to people, to stay connected through social media and through whatever we have it, readily available for us to stay connected, and to consume it too. This is the teaching from Ajaya, right? It's just like we have to consume it, we have to eat it. Like my daily practice is consuming the chaos, consuming the depression, consuming the anger, consuming the boredom, like eating it, and I eat it by actually relaxing around everything and understanding that, like, the nature of my mind, the boundaries of my mind are boundless. Like I have no boundaries in my mind, right? And so when I feel overwhelmed, I am being consumed by these things, and I shrink, and we have this natural tendency in our practice that we can get through suffering and discomfort if we can just shrink and get really small. Like if I can just ball myself into like a little tiny compact package or a ball, and then I'm going to take away all the surface area that can experience harm and pain and woundedness. If I take that surface area away, and I just ball myself into this thing, I can just get through things. It's like it being like a little roly-poly, which we call that roly-polies. When I was growing up, the little insects that roll up into a ball, and you can just like, roll them around. They're just like little tiny things. It's like we're like these little roly-polies. We're gonna like roll around, But what we're doing when we contract like that, we're actually making it much easier for something to come along and eat us. Like the anger, like the sadness, like the hopelessness. We're just compressing ourselves into a manageable state where this emotional state can just wash over us, and overwhelm us, and what we're actually trying to do is to expand our awareness, our minds, wherever it's our breath, we're expanding. That expansion is how we're able to consume everything. So when I feel my anger coming, or my sadness, or my hopelessness, or my horniness, my lust, right? All of that, I can either ball up and be consumed by it, or I can get big. And when I get big, what I'm also doing is actually experiencing this intensity, I'm experiencing, I have to experience this emotional energy. I have to experience all of this. But in my experience, I'm actually learning how to let go, you know. And again, letting go meaning that I'm not pushing anything away. I'm not trying to grab onto it. I'm just letting it be. That's my understanding of letting go, letting it be. And so I get big and I experience it. I say, God, this is fucking bullshit. Why am I having to experience this? But I keep getting wider. I keep, and I keep planting myself in the earth, and I keep calling in my sources of refuge, my guides and my deities, right? I rely on my breath, right? I take refuge in all this, and I let them hold me as I am trying to hold these huge, intense experiences. And so, but when we get deeper into the tradition, right, we begin to understand that the things that I struggle with the most are themselves an expression of my mind, and if we have, a lot of devotion in our practice, then we say, okay, this thing that I'm struggling with is actually an expression not only of my mind, but also of the deity. It is an expression of the Lama or the Guru. It's just the mind of the Lama and the Guru all expressing itself, right? And then it shows me a different face of what it is that I'm struggling with, to be with. But that gets us into the fifth stage, which is acceptance, right? You begin to accept it, and for me, acceptance again is an expression of love. I begin to love it, and loving doesn't mean I'm celebrating. I'm happy about it. I'm like, yeah, girl, yes, queen, yes, depression, yes, loss, yes, death, yes, for financial instability, yes to everything. But what it is actually is saying that I say rather, okay, there you are. There you are. There's the anger, there's the depression, there's all of my insecurity. There you are. Okay. And then I slide into this relationship with the woundedness, and I let it go. And I come back to the earth, I come back to the deity, I come back to the Lama, I come back to wherever it is I have chosen to hold me. I just sit there. I sit there and I say, okay, right? And what are people grieving? I'm just going to go through this list. Leo, one of your best friends died in Mexico alone, and we have to mourn that. We have to mourn the loss of someone that we love, and we have to give it space. We can't push it away, nor can we grab onto it, but we let it be there, and we experience it, and we get wide around it. And there's a way in which, so we're naturally experiencing a lot of discomfort. I want us to choose discomfort. I want us, everyone's like, I don't have any agency, my choice is being taken away. Okay, then choose discomfort then. And then therefore your agency is going to be reestablished. It's like, instead of avoiding, I say, okay, welcome. Welcome this intense experience, this fear. Welcome, come and sit here. I'm going to open my heart. I'm going to experience this. I'm going to rely on my sources of refuge. And we're going to make it through this. I have to welcome you and I have to experience you. And I don't know when this is going to be over, this experience of mourning, but I know that I'm here now, um, taking care of you. Um, so I'm really sorry to hear that, Leo. And am grieving stability in your future. Hmm. I'll just go down, thinking about climate catastrophe all the time, grieving plans, fun, income, supporting myself and my family. As income dries up and plans are canceled, I feel void facing me. Hmm. And part of facing that void, and also the worry about about climate change, and instability is that you have to say okay, and that energy is coming. That energy is a lot of energy around the heart center. So it's like it's opening up and saying, okay, I have no idea what the fuck is gonna happen. And this is where my teacher kind of steps in and he says, and whatever happens, happens. Whatever comes, comes. I don't need anything at all. You know? Like whatever happens, happens, whatever comes, comes. I don't need anything at all. What do I really need? Um, yeah, we need money, we need housing, right? But and food and medical care. But what else do we need? Like, what is it that we're not tapping into that we have that can actually sustain us through this insecurity, this uncertainty? And if the void is coming, this void that I'm facing, this thing, this catastrophe, I have to allow it to be there. When I allow something to be there, that's when I touch the ground. I touch the ground of that experience and I step into reality in that moment. Um, it feels disorienting. Hmm. It's, I would change the word disorienting and I would encourage you to use disrupting. It's disrupted. It's disrupting me. It's disrupting me. It's forcing me to be in a relationship with this basic truth that has always been the truth, which is that things change and I will die. You know, and this is the hardest contemplation. I really hate giving this teaching. I really do, because I want everyone to like, be happy and to get like these really, I'm not. I don't want to be a hater around like sugar coated chocolate covered teachings because I think that's wonderful. As Mary Poppins says, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. Um, I don't really have a spoonful of sugar for this one, but basically the medicine is that like I'm dying, right? I'm gonna die. Everyone that I love is gonna die, and somehow I keep forgetting that, you know, like I am dying. Everyone around me is dying. Um, there are people who were specifically died because of the pandemic that we're in now. And I have to let my heart break around that. I have to contemplate what that means. That everything that is born has to die. Everything created has to end. And very often in a day, I will stop and do exactly this. I will stop and say, you know what, I'm going to die, right? I can die at any moment from anything. I could die. I can move on. But what does that mean then in terms of living my life? How can I just live my life cutting through the fear, cutting through the hesitancy, and just be in this world, in this moment, moment to moment? And how does that living moment to moment actually help me to move through this fear of death of myself and everyone that I love? I am not like the grief, the sadness, the hopelessness isn't bigger than I am, but like we believe that. and I have to disrupt. If you want something to be disrupted, channel this energy of disruption into the belief that I'm smaller than the sadness, than the despair. I am much bigger than the sadness and the despair. The sadness and despair and suffering is only an expression of my mind, and I can train to have agency over my mind. I do have agency over my mind. It's just the training of believing in that and getting used to that, taking responsibility. Karen, you're grieving for nurses and doctors, walking into hell every day right now. Yeah. But we all, and that's intense, but we all have our front lines. And we have to figure out what our front lines are. Most of our front lines are not going, into the hospitals and nursing homes. We have to figure out what our front line is, and we need to go there. Like talking with Lama Justin, his front line is getting well, right? Is moving through this illness, and he's like, I can't help with the teaching. I can't help with students. I have to help myself. And that's my front line, and sometimes, we have to figure out what our front lines is, and it's not going to be something that's glamorous. It's not going to be covered by the media. No one's going to applaud us. There's not going to be a parade for us going to our front lines, but we still have to do it, As again, another Lady Gaga reference, where she says in Art Pop, I live for the applause. Stop living for the applause, right? Just live for knowing how to go to your front lines and how to hold space there and to be there for it. Grieving the loss of contact with my brothers, wondering what I did wrong. I still want to be with them all right now. Yeah. You letting go of that blame, the blame that we're, expressing towards ourselves, And so I think, once we get into this short practice, I think that could be helpful. But we're missing contact with family and lovers and friends, and you have to let that be there. Like you have to acknowledge and accept the longing. Yeah. I realized I continue to grieve the death of my mother and sister. Yeah. That's what happens. Like when we go into periods of grieving, you realize that you're pulling all this old stuff. And I'm going to go a little further too. I don't know if y'all are ready for this, but we're not just grieving stuff from this life. We're grieving stuff from past lives. We're going through shit that we did like 10 lifetimes ago, and it's still in our consciousness. And you say, oh, that's bullshit. Well, here's another way. Here's a clinical way to frame it. Transhistorical trauma, intergenerational trauma, right? And so we're still dealing with that, That's a part of past life karma, intergenerational transhistorical trauma. Isn't an end or a change what helps me to see it as transformation, but maybe that's just there. Sugarcoating. I still have to grapple with what the transformation is about. Like, absolutely, transformation is still work. If it's the end or the beginning, it doesn't matter. It's like there's still like the holding of the grief around that. As we transform, we still have to grieve the transformation because we're moving from one place to another. And in between that moving, and it's not even the case that when we get to this other place, like all that grief is going to go away. Like, I don't think that's the case necessarily, but I think that like in the process, there's a lot. And this period that we're in, and I call this the Bardo, the middle passage, many names that I have for it in my practice. Like this is where everything, like the veils are being stripped away. This is what the apocalypse is, right? Like the apocalypse is the unveiling. So you're having to come into contact with, I would say honestly, you know, everything that we're scared to death of is being laid out at the table in front of us. And we can either turn that into a feast where we're, you know, moving into the feast, engaging with the feast of all the stuff that we're terrified of, inviting guests to kind of come and help us consume it, to work with it, you know, or we avoid it. And if we avoid this feast that's being laid out in front of us, then we're bypassing the opportunity to move into this new way of being on the other side of this. You know, we find ourselves trapped in the old ways of being, you know, and that's going to deeply intensify our suffering. As I've said over and over again, you know, in the past 2 years, there are two things happening during the unveiling, the apocalypse. First is that there are people who will see the truth and will just be like, fuck it, I'm not going to deal with this, you know, and they will continue to bury themselves in these old ways of being. And then on the other end, I think there are folks who are really engaging and trying to change and be with this change and the truth and everything that's opening up. We're metabolizing and we're processing through this, and we're evolving, you know. So in a way, this group is evolving away from the group that's remained to stay stable, has remained to stay solid and stable and permanent, you know, which is all an illusion to begin with. You're going to see that separation more and more, you know, because not all of us are ready to do the work in this life. Like everyone isn't going to make it. Everyone's not going to survive this period. I'm not talking about physical death. I'm just talking about mental, spiritual. That mentally, spiritually, a lot of people aren't going to make it. They're not going to make it to the middle passage. As my ancestors say, you know, not everyone made it. You know, not all of us who were taken, and you know, into the ships, into this process, not all of us made it. You know, and that's a part of what this has to. This is a part of what it means to journey like this. You know, into the heart of this world, into the heart of darkness. Really, not everyone's going to make it, and you have to mourn even that. You have to mourn even that. And this is really deep work, you know, and we can't, you know, this isn't a time we're not, it's not about sitting around and bullshitting ourselves, right? You know, it's either you do the work or you don't, you know, because like, yeah, you know, I think I'm a bodhisattva, whatever a bodhisattva means, I don't know. Like at this point, I don't mind leaving people, you know, I'm like Harriet Tubman, literally. I'm like, I'm moving on. You can come and go. You know, I mean, I'm not going to shoot you or anything, but like, you know, literally it's like, it's your choice. Like, I'm not forcing anyone. I'm not grabbing anyone and talking about, come on, girl, it's time for us to go. It's time for us to get the hell out of this. No, I'm not doing it. It's not that I don't care. It's that like, that's not my work. You know, it's to force you to do the work of transformation, moving to the other side. You know, if you're ready, let's do it. You know, if you're not ready, then you know we'll see each other in another life. You know, guarantee, like it's a guarantee that we're going to run into each other, and we'll just continue. You know, it's not a big deal for me. It's yeah, I've mourned it as well, but like I just even you know. Like this is the long game. This is a long game. It's not just about this life. Like it's you know, I don't want to be fundamental right now. You know, I don't want to scare people away, you know, but like, you know, not that you haven't been scared away by my assistant talking about the mother and Tara and Medicine Buddha, but like this is we talk about rebirth, it's just the long game. We're at different places. You know, maybe you're not ready to do the work in this life, but that doesn't mean that like the next life you know, you're not going to be ready, like, or the life after that. It's just like it's like popcorn. Like it's like when you pop popcorn, you know, and it's like, you know, there are some kernels that pop quick, right off the bat, they're popping. Some kernels don't even pop in the back if you're doing it on the stove or whatever, so there's a different, like, kind of time for all of this, and we pop in different places, different times, under different conditions. And these are conditions for some of us to pop. Maybe not the conditions. I mean, pop in a really good way, pop into realization. Maybe these aren't the conditions for the rest of us to pop in, but maybe our conditions are coming down the road. Maybe it's this life, later in this life, maybe it's the next life. But having said all that, I want to also reiterate that, like, this is fucking samsara. Like, you also have to get out of this belief that samsara works out for us. Samsara is doing exactly what samsara is supposed to do. This samsara isn't off script or out of character right now. It is like samsara is fucking playing the character. Like, samsara is going for the Oscar this year. Because samsara is like, oh, I'm finally figuring out how to play my role. And this is the cycle of birth and rebirth. This expression of wisdom. This expression of ignorance and lack of clarity. This is samsara. Like, samsara is doing exactly, what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be full of disease and violence and hate. It's supposed to be full of struggle. And you say, okay, so samsara, you're going to do you, but now I'm going to do me, which is getting the hell out of here. So I am, in my practice, transforming my relationship to you. So you are the embodiment of ignorance. I am going to therefore be the embodiment of wisdom and compassion. And that's how I frustrate and disrupt my participation and my movement through samsara. It's going for the Grammy, the Oscar. It's going for the EGOT. It's going for the EGOT. So it's going for that Golden Globe as well. It's going for that Tony. So is it possible to have meaningful relationships when you're popped on pop? You're going to have to place boundaries. Absolutely. Because you're going to, like, when you're popping, you're going to start, listen, this is personal experience here. Like, when you start popping, you have to learn how to set boundaries, I just can't, I have really dear, great friends, but like, now I can't sit with all of my friends and talk about all the stuff I'm talking about. I can't talk about ancestors and, and enlightenment and trauma and grief, but I know that they're doing work, and I trust that work, but it's maybe not so as intensely as I'm doing this work. And it's also the ways in which I have to allow people to be where they are as well. And I have to mourn that. I don't proselytize. Like, I don't like stand on the corner and like talking about, spreading the gospel, of the Dharma. Like, it's just like, I'm not that kind of interested in Dharma to do that, but like, I show up to spaces where I'm invited, and do that. But like, I'm not trying to go out into the grocery store right now and like convert people, because it's not, when people are ready, they will find the teaching, as many of us have in our practice. When we're ready, when we start getting interested, the teachings come, because the teachings are always there. The teachings are always around us. I've been surrounded by these teachings my whole life, but it wasn't until I started suffering and falling into my suffering in a way that I felt trapped. That's when the teachings were like, oh, here we are. We've always been here. Why don't you hang on to us to get through this? And samsara is doing its thing. It's here to help us awaken. That's right. Samsara, therefore, can be a friend, can be an agent of liberation for us if we just realize that it's pointing us to who and what we are. Samsara can be a mirror. I am not the ignorance. I am not the chaos. I am not this destruction. I'm actually something else, and I can abide with that. So let's just do this practice. Let's just go into our practice now. So be sure to get some water. And this is we're going to do a better factor practice. So we're going to do an abbreviated version of the 7 homecomings. This is very much like the practices that I'm doing online on Instagram every day. All right. So just allowing yourself to come into a position that feels appropriate for you in this moment. And if you can, I mean, if you feel resourced enough, if just turning just a little bit of attention to the breath, breathing in and out of the nose to begin with. I'm taking 2 full deep inhales and exhales. And then on the third inhale, we'll inhale really deeply. And then on the exhale, imagine that exhale guides you down to the seat, where you notice the weight of the body. So exhaling down to the seat. So we're dropping our attention just very low. We're trying to get out of our heads. We're trying to get from above the shoulders and down into the body, down into the root chakra, down into the seat, down to the earth. Noticing the weight of the body, the sensations of your body making contact with the seat. Noticing gravity. Now wonder if you can trust the seat to hold you. What is that experience like, to let the seat hold you? Now dropping our attention even deeper, moving down into the earth under us, the land. We're letting the earth hold our attention. And imagining that wherever we sense our attention in the earth, so our attention may be at the surface of the earth under us, it may be a couple inches into the earth, and maybe a couple of feet into the earth, but just notice where your attention is being held by the earth. And just imagine that from that place your attention is located, that you're breathing in and out of that place, that space. So you're breathing in and out of where the earth is holding your attention. So pulling your breath deep. Now, shifting our attention up to the heart center. Just breathing in and out of the heart center. And just beginning to reflect on something that you're grateful for. And let the energy of that gratitude begin to form within your heart center. And now I invite you to welcome into your space, to invite into your space your benefactors. Your benefactors include your guiding deities, your gurus, teachers, your ancestors, your lineage. And we don't have to know who these beings are, but we simply say, please come and sit with me. You know, any being who protects me, who guides me, who loves me, who's working to disrupt my suffering, please come and sit with me. You don't have to see them, you don't have to feel them, but you can just have a sense that they're just gathering around you in a circle. And then returning to this energy of gratitude, we share this energy of gratitude with our benefactors. We thank them with this energy, thanking them for protecting us, for guiding us, for guarding us, for holding us, along with the earth under us. We can share it as we can share it as light emanating from our heart centers. We can share it as the energy of warmth. And in return, they begin to radiate and share this energy of care into the space around us. And this energy of care, which can feel like love or kindness or generosity, however this resonates with you, but that energy begins to fill the space and you feel as if you're being held by that energy, by that care. You can see it as light around you, you can feel it as heat, or however you want to identify with it, that you can also just say, oh, there is energy happening around me. And that's enough as well. You can imagine that this energy begins to slowly kind of sink into our bodies. And in my practice, I just imagine that this energy of care is slowly seeping into my skin, into my bones and muscles, to my organs, all these other tissues, into like my fat cells, molecules, anything, everything, into my lungs and heart. And I imagine that this energy of care begins to search for and look for the ways in which I'm holding experiences of grief in my body. And for me, in my practice, I hold grief physically in my neck, my kind of brow, forehead area, my upper chest, my shoulders. And just imagine that through this energy of care, my benefactors, my circle of care, my guardians, my protectors, they're actually trying to hold first these physical experiences of grief in my body. They're taking care of it, they're loving it. They're trying to love these experiences. And if you're able to work with the breath, and if you can't, that's fine as well. But just if you can't work with the breath, imagine that you're breathing into those physical sensations that are holding grief. So you're breathing into it, you're inhaling into it. And imagine that that inhale begins to dissolve that physical grief. And as it dissolves, you breathe it out, you exhale it. And you can exhale through the mouth. So breathing through the nose, dissolving that grief, that physical grief, exhaling. And you can stay here, and if you can add another step to this, which is actually inhaling into that physical sensation, holding the breath there, holding the breath for at least 5 seconds and allowing your attention to drop into that tension that you're creating, that holding of energy and breath, and then exhaling that energy out. So when we hold the breath in these sensations, we're actually concentrating the energy of prana, life force energy, and that prana can actually help to dissolve these uncomfortable sensations of grief in our experience. Not only is it concentrating, we're also learning how to have a little more agency over this life force energy. So you can practice at any one of those levels. Or if you're having problems with the breath, you can just imagine this happening without the breath. So we'll just stay with this particular practice just for a couple more moments, just maybe another minute. And then we'll move on to another exercise. And now I invite you to transition into a slightly different practice. And many of you have done this already with me. But imagine that you're releasing this energy of grief down into the earth. So you're letting go of that energy, the mental experience, also the physical experience. And you're just imagining that energy, that grief is being pulled down through the body into the earth for the earth to hold and dissolve. So essentially giving it up to the earth, offering this discomfort to the earth and letting the earth hold it for us. And you may find yourself, in the practice, on one hand, believing that, oh, we're giving this away so we don't have to work, but it's basically what we're actually doing is in a way creating space around these experiences of grief that actually opens the door into us experiencing the grief, but experiencing it with a foundation, with an anchor that's actually kind of stabilizing the work of experience. It's so much easier to experience the grief when we feel as if we're being grounded or anchored by something else. Now, if you feel up to it, shifting this kind of anchor and looking back out into the circle around you, your care, the circle of care. And what would it mean for you to imagine actually sending this energy of grief out into the circle to be held by the circle around you, to be held by your guides and your guardians, your benefactors? How can we make an offering of our grief to our benefactors? Just experiment with that. And so what one of the things rather that we're trying to do in the practice is to get into the habit or get into this experience of being held by something, to being supported by something. Goes back to my perpetual teaching on refuge. What are you taking refuge in right now? Right? The world is falling apart. The climate is falling apart. People that we love are dying. We may die. You can't, you can't face this alone. You can't do the work of metabolizing and processing this energy alone. So we have to take refuge and be held by something, Again, over and over for me, it's this practice of being held by the mother, or being held by God for some of you, And again, we're trying to figure out what it is for us that's appropriate for us in our practice, in our beliefs, in our world systems. We're trying to figure out what's powerful and meaningful for us, right? And once you find what's meaningful, then you take refuge in it. Build an altar to it. Make statues to it, make offerings to whatever you're taking refuge in. But make it meaningful, make it real. And then you in the same way we're doing now, allow yourself to be held by this. And you have to deal with the trauma that many of us have around accepting and deeply internalizing, letting love in. We have to deal with that. We have to deal with the years, of the trauma from conditional love. And this is part of the healing that we're going through. I have to let myself be loved and cared for. If you're practicing Tara with me, this is darshan. So we're having to allow the mother to gaze upon us, to glance upon us, to look into us. We have to let go of everything we're trying to hide and let ourselves be glanced, be seen. Even the heartbreak, even the grief, even the shame, the fear, the terror, everything. Everything. And so this is a new mantra for you all as well, which is everything. 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 If you're looking for a teaching about everything, go to my Instagram page and scroll back to November, where you'll find a 15-minute video from Thailand that I did about everything. 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 So everything, giving everything to my circle of care, giving everything to the earth, giving everything to the mother, giving everything to God. For you die-hard Vajrayana practitioners, give everything to emptiness. Give everything over to the emptiness. And don't be afraid of the broken heart. Don't be afraid of the loneliness and the isolation. is there trying to teach us. Let the teaching happen. Let yourself experience. Let yourself be held. And so we'll begin coming out of the practice now. And we begin by thanking the earth under us for supporting us, for holding us. We share this energy of gratitude down into the earth. We shift our attention to the breath, just acknowledging the breath, thanking the breath for holding us during this practice, for supporting us. And then we shift to the circle of care around us. And we thank our circle of care, our benefactors, for supporting us, for loving us. And then we invite them to return back to where they came from, to join us. So it's coming back to our bodies, to this moment, and just doing just a few, stretchings and so forth. I like to just raise my arms above my head. A little stretch. A little head rotation. A little rotation from the hip. And side twist. And then if you are able to, just a few cleansing breaths as well. And so with the cleansing breath, for me, I like to inhale deeply, and then as I exhale out of every opening in my body, my nostrils, my mouth, my ears, my hands, everything. So breathing deeply in, we're going to do this 3 times. Okay. Normal breath, and one more time. Okay, and one more time. um, and so I know we're supposed to go to 12:30, so I just want to briefly go through the questions in the question box here. Uh, and um, and okay, so oh, okay, okay, everyone, here I am again. Sorry. um, I don't know what happened. It's weird. So let me, as I was saying, I'm gonna briefly go through these last three questions because I do have something at one that I have to get to as well. So, how do we organize while grieving? How do we engage in activism from a place of spaciousness, not contraction around anger? Absolutely. Yeah, I love the comments that everyone's putting down here as well. So, how do we organize while grieving? We actually have to make grieving one of our organizing partners. So, grieving isn't something that's just like on the side that we do, but grieving is a partner that we invite along to the work that we're doing in our organizing and collective work. Grieving there has to be space for the formal process of grieving, in our experience um, as well. Um, and how do we engage in activism from a place of spaciousness? We have to disconnect from anger as a source of energy and then reconnect to love as that source of energy. And anger becomes this thing that's a secondary thing that we can use in the work, but anger isn't the primary energy that we're using to get stuff done because it's a volatile kind of energy, particularly if we don't have agency over it. This is exactly what Love and Rage is about. So Sarah, go ahead and get that book. Go ahead and pre-order. Get that book. Be the first one. And the activist, you won't be the first one in the activist community to get this, but that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. The book is for activists and for Black folks and for queer and trans folks, who are just really pissed off to learn how to come into agency with our anger and rage through the tools of love, through the tools of self-care, but ultimately through the tool of mourning, making mourning one of our tools of activism and organizing tools. To reject some sorrow, do we also have to reject things that give us pleasure? No, absolutely not. But we have to understand how to use pleasure to get free. Good taste, sound, sights, they're all empty. But so when you experience something pleasurable, all you have to start doing is learning how to offer that sense of pleasure to all beings. And that's how we create spaciousness around that pleasure. And that's how we begin to dissolve the fixation around pleasure, and we open into this vulnerability, this generosity. So when I experience, like when I have like a really good cocktail, which is several times a day now, I say, God, may all beings, everyone have this pleasure. Not the pleasure of like having a cocktail, obviously, because, not everyone drinks, but may everyone have something that sparks pleasure for them in their life right now, right? May I share this out, but do we have to reject them the way we might reject ignorance? No, we don't reject it. You don't even, I mean, ignorance is another thing I won't get into now, but you don't reject it, you accept it, you embrace it, and then you open your minds and say, may all beings experience this, right? How do we create a sturdy circle of care? I don't even really even really imagine believing this around me. If I can imagine it around others, is that where to start? Yes, you can start imagining this around others, absolutely. I can fiercely imagine it around my children, but when I turn back to me, they aren't there. So you don't have to feel anything, you don't have to connect to anything for things to be there. So just kind of planting that seed. It's like our protection isn't a matter of consent. To get into this, when we start working with this energy, this realm, we have to understand that like there are things, we've made choices before our lives, before this particular lifetime, that we actually aren't conscious of. And some of those choices are about how we've attracted certain energies around us and how those energies are benefactors and guides for us. So it's, as I say all the time, it's like the other realms of beings don't require our consent or our belief, to exist. Ideas on tuning into one's own benefactors. Often it's around the ways in which we've blocked receiving and opening up to the expressions of love that can actually numb us. And so sometimes the ways in which we struggle to connect to benefactors are really ways in which our trauma is actually expressing itself in our practice. A way to get into this would be just to do basic benefactor practice. And that benefactor practice is basically like reflect on gratitude and do that gratitude practice, and then reflect on a being, a person or being, an animal that you naturally experience love with and who loves you in return. And just sitting with that and practicing with that. And then over time, that really begins to cultivate this kind of spaciousness to be with multiple benefactors in this way. So just like this, if our wound is around feeling unloved, how can we work on allowing the love in? How can we imagine the benefactors? I think you have to stop trying so hard initially. I think there's an aggression that we can fall into where we're forcing this thing to happen, and that actually intensifies the trauma around being unlovable. And so we relax that. And actually, Lorena, if you're doing Tara practice, I want you to get into the habit of imagining that you're just kind of like giving up this experience of being unlovable and laying it at the feet of the mother, laying it into the earth, whatever your refuge is. It's like, keep giving it up. And as we keep giving it up, we're actually dissolving these layers of hurt and woundedness over and over again. Surrendering is such a liberatory piece of this and the work. When I can't work with something, like when I feel something hard and blocked in my experience, I say, everything to the mother. Everything to the mother. Over and over again, everything to the mother. Everything, even this aversion, this numbness, this trauma, everything to the mother, everything to the earth. And I stopped trying to feel lovable. And I just focus on surrendering and letting go. Um, so are we grieving for others truly, or is it for ourselves? Or do we separate our own egotism and let that go? Um, I say you do all the above. I think you grieve for yourself, you grieve for others. Grieving for yourself helps you to grieve for others, right? And I think sometimes we misunderstand these practices, and we say, oh, like it's better for me to go and take care of other people and to grieve for other people and to love other people and to have compassion for other people, and that's actually not sustainable for anyone, especially you. So the work is actually turning your attention back around and to say, I need to actually do work for myself. I need to grieve for my experiences. I need to love. I need to do my compassion. That self work is how we develop the capacity to eventually turn that work around and to hold space for other people. The space that you hold for other people is actually the space that you've cultivated for yourself. When I hold space for other people, all I'm doing is inviting other people's experiences into the space that I've created for myself. And that's it. And that's it. That's the trick of it, right? Um, and yeah, and then I'm grieving also the shift in all my work, and well, my work has intensified, so I'm a person who thrives in crisis, both professionally and just interpersonally, and this is kind of how it is. My dharma is, as I was telling Lama Justin once, like my practice is a practice that activates during crisis. Like it just happens. Like I'm just like, whoo, you know. I ride these waves of energy, and it's quite profound. Um, so that's it. Oh, that's so sweet. Your teachings are sweet like honey. As always, it makes me feel better in my soul. And this kind of teaching, you can spread it on bread. You can spread it on pancakes. Um, you can like spread it on, in PayPal and Venmo and just send it to me. You can send that sweetness back to me in the form of electronic money. But anyhow, so I just want to thank everyone for showing up for your practice. Please continue to communicate with us through emails and through so forth, and to let us know what you need and what you want to see. We're adding more things all the time. And yeah, just let us know what you need, and we continue. So later today at 2, we have our Spanish speaking Sangha meetup at 2. So please tune in for that if you're a Spanish speaker. Tomorrow we have our 11:30 practice group, and then Medicine Buddha at 7. And then Wednesday we have our fantastic presentation of our community values from Eric, who's been working on it for a while now, and is also introducing the next stage of that project. We want to take values and ethics and all this really seriously. So please show up for that on Wednesday to hear more about that. And you can find this document on our website as well. You can read through it right now. This really beautiful document that Eric, who's our community ethicist, created. Okay, so everyone, thank you so much, and I will see you again. And one day we'll see each other in person as well, too. But don't worry, we're not going to be an entirely online community in the future. Okay, thank you.